I don't know if there's a better term for this, but I want to talk about something that I call contextual level design. That's when the physical geometry of a video game level and the visuals and theme of that level are perfectly in sync. The best example of this that I can give is World 5 from Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, known in the streets as Juicy Jungle. Each world within this level deals with a different part of a fruit factory. You see the fruit being harvested, then chopped up, then turned into juice, then jelly, then finally popsicles. In each stage, what's happening to the fruit will affect the level design. You'll be running along conveyor belts, avoiding the knives, swimming through the juice, or bouncing on the jelly. The visual design and the level design are in perfect harmony. Within the context of the game's world, the geometry that you're moving through makes perfect sense. Despite how pretentious wannabe video game critics, like me, will scoff at mainstream AAA games, contextual level design is actually something they do really well. A realistic art style requires the level design to fit the logic of the real world. You can't just have floating platforms everywhere. This is something that Naughty Dog in particular is great at, and I honestly think it's the best aspect of the games they make. The Mario series has an iffy relationship with contextual level design. Mario worlds tend to be abstract, so the rules that govern them can be blurry. The game with the strongest contextual level design would have to be Super Mario Sunshine. All the main courses make sense next to each other, they all have different roles that befit areas of a tropical island, and all of these roles inform each area's level design. It makes sense for there to be a bunch of long metal beams in Rico Harbor because it's a shipping harbor. Maybe not everything is totally logical, like a village on top of a tree, but within the world of Super Mario Sunshine, this fits in well. Super Mario Galaxy's contextual level design is a different story. Yes, most worlds are just composed of a bunch of floating platforms, but they're all planets, so it makes sense for them to be there. Obviously, gravity doesn't work at all like it does in the real world, but it's consistent, which gives us a baseline for what to expect. But often while the aesthetics of a planet will fit the level's theme, the shapes don't quite line up. I'm not saying this is egregious, but most of the time a planet will be designed from purely a gameplay perspective, without much thought to the larger picture. However, the galaxy in the game with the strongest contextual level design also happens to be the most abstract, the Toy Time Galaxy. All planets with it are closely connected in terms of both theme and gameplay. It makes no sense for a galaxy like this to exist in outer space, but once we're in it, it makes the most sense. So let's go ahead and jump in and see just what makes the Toy Time Galaxy tick. The Toy Time Galaxy makes it clear from before the start that this is going to be an experience unlike any other. We need look no further than the 8-bit Mario floating over top, reaching out to the player with a sense of cosmic connection of an identical twin brother closer than an actual twin brother. Other galaxies had plenty of planets which had no business existing. There's no logical or scientific reason that outer space should contain a giant haunted house or a bowl full of water or a planet in the shape of a friend's head. But a planet that acts as both a mirror and a time machine smashes through any barriers we thought the designers might have constructed around themselves. Seeing this 8-bit Mario floating there as unassumingly as any other planet leads us to think, well, if that's there, what else is out there? If that's possible, is anything possible? The answers to those questions are everything and yes, respectively. To this point, the Toy Time Galaxy manages to keep players expecting the unexpected, then being given the unexpected. So far into the game that any other design team would have run out of ideas long before. Once we land in the Toy Time Galaxy, we'll see that any preconceived notion of what rules should apply to a level that takes place in space will have melted away. There's no logical reason why deep in space there should be a toy train riding on a train track, with the backdrop of a child's bedroom and a remix of the original Super Mario Bros. Theme playing. But to Super Mario Galaxy, the more something shouldn't be possible is all the more reason for it to be possible. It's a game that says yes to itself at every opportunity. For toy-themed Galaxy, I can't think of a more fitting start than a wooden train. Who among us didn't have a toy train almost exactly like this as a child? In this way, Mario Galaxy is able to take something that everyone is familiar with and twist it in a way that makes it exciting and unique. This starting area offers just a taste of the pure, colorful insanity that's soon to come. If this first planet was a tap on the shoulder, the next one is a punch in the face. But a good kind of punch in the face, if such a thing can even exist. Because look at this place. It's so vibrant and stimulating, it's practically psychedelic. It's a visual and auditory onslaught. All of the colors clash so hard that somehow they don't clash at all. It's not just a feast for the eyes, it's a Mobius strip-shaped buffet line. The first enemy we see here is the Mecha Bowser. It's a heftier take on the classic Mecha Koopa, which were introduced back in Super Mario World. They take a ground pound to defeat, which places them a step above most regular enemies. One thing that's cool about the Toy Time Galaxy is that aside from Mario and the Toads, almost all creatures, whether they be friendly or hostile, are mechanical. On the more kind-natured side, we have the Gearmos, then the enemies are primarily these Mecha Bowsers and the Sentry Beams. The boss of the galaxy uses a machine to fight us, and even Mario himself takes on a more mechanical aspect with the spring power-up. But we'll talk more about that one later. Keeping the level's creatures on track is a great way of tying everything together thematically. It shows that some extra care went into making sure the enemies made sense to be here, not just throwing in some Goombas and calling it a day. This area isn't as open as something like the Honey Hive or Beach Bowl galaxies, but it does have a sandboxy element to it, and places to explore. If we head up to the left here, we can grab a 1-up on our way to this rooftop. There's nothing really up here except for a panicking Gearmo, who points us in the direction of our eventual goal for this mission. This advice might be appreciated, but it's not needed. It's not like we can end up on the wrong planet accidentally. The only other real secret of this area is that if we work our way over to the right side, going around on top of these vents, we can find a life mushroom. It's nothing crazy, but hey, when I have the chance to double my health in a video game, I take it. One thing that makes this planet unique are these purple surfaces, all of which have their own gravity. It gives the walls an impression of stickiness, and has us looking at the whole area as even more of a three-dimensional space than it already was. Even most round planets in Super Mario Galaxy could theoretically be cut open and spread out across a flat surface, and functionally not all that much would be lost. But that is not the case for this planet here. We have to look at the whole thing like a Rubik's Cube, considering all sides as individuals, but also thinking about what part they play in the bigger picture. The quick snaps between the two different poles of gravity might feel slightly uncomfortable at first, but it doesn't take too long to get used to it. Then it's us using the gravity, not the gravity using us. It turns from us being pulled in a way we weren't expecting to harnessing the gravity to solve a multi-section puzzle. Okay, it's only 2 sections, but that's still technically multi-section. Let's keep in mind, this is a Mario game at the end of the day. We'll have to leave the more complicated puzzles to Zachtronics. But even though it's not a very complex puzzle, it is interesting, and most importantly, a satisfying one to solve. First, we run along the wall on the right here, avoiding the laser and then unscrewing this flathead screw. Once the launch star is open, we go around to the bottom, unscrew this flathead screw to drop down underneath, and then screw in this Phillips head screw, which will create a pathway. That'll give us an avenue to the launch star and then a straight shot through the McDonald's milkshake straw. Here on the next planet, we're introduced to another one of Super Mario Galaxy's power-ups, the Spring Mushroom. The Spring Mushroom is one of only 3 power-ups that are original to Super Mario Galaxy, the other 2 being the Bee Mushroom and the Boo Mushroom. I'm not counting the Rainbow Star in this because, come on, it's just the Invincibility Star with a literal new coat of paint. The Boo Mushroom exists, certainly, but that's all about I can really say on it. On the other hand, the Bee Mushroom is emblematic of Mario Galaxy. It pops up across the game with more frequency than any other item, and there's definitely more to it than any other item. So among these two, where does the Spring Mushroom stack up? The Spring Mushroom is a power-up that is controversial at best, ending up on many a listicle with the title resembling something like,
"These are the top 10 worst Mario power-ups of all time."
Like for instance, we have this one on insider-gaming.com, where it places number 16 on the list of 16 worst Mario power-ups. Clearly this was going to be a list of 15 and they wanted to stretch it to include the Spring Mushroom, because why otherwise would you have it be 16? However, I can't trust any list of the worst Mario power-ups that includes the wing cap from Super Mario 64. Listen here, insider-gaming.com. The wing cap is a monumental achievement in momentum-based 3D flight simulation. Placing it on a list like this is tantamount to putting Yeezus on the list of worst hip-hop albums. Although you can leave the Boo Mushroom on there, that's fine. So I give this context to say I don't like the Spring Mushroom. I love it. The majority of the criticism for it I see basically boils down to it being bad because it's difficult to control. No, the spring mushroom is not bad because it's difficult to control. It's good because it's difficult to control. Allow me to explain. The power-ups in 3D Mario games take on a vastly different role than they do in 2D Mario games. In the 2D games, especially the older ones, the power-ups are there to give the player a distinct advantage that they don't have otherwise. Maybe that's letting them take an extra hit, or giving them an attack, or allowing them some new method of traversal. In any case, getting a power-up in the 2D games is a straight upgrade. The flip side of this is that just as easily as one of these power-ups can be given to the player, they can also be taken away. If you lose your Fire Flower or Tanuki suit or cape or what have you, there's no guarantee you'll get it back within the same level. In fact, for the classic games, it's virtually guaranteed you won't get it back. This means that while a level in a 2D Mario game might contain elements that are tailored to a certain power-up, they can't be specifically designed around it. With the power-up so easily losable, the developers had to create each level so it can be completed by a Mario with no special abilities. It might be easier to get to the end of a level with a power-up, but it's still possible to get there without one. The 3D games, especially Super Mario Galaxy, approach power-ups very differently. Instead of being a bonus to players who perform well, their usage is always required to beat the levels they're in. The power-ups here are not rewards, they're tools. The levels are completely designed around them. They're not something you want, they're something you need. And the ability to tailor a level around a power-up gives the designer so much more creative flexibility. That goes back to my criticism of the fire and ice flowers in the game, because the 20-second time limit they each have puts a complete block on any new types of level design. The fact that you may need a certain power-up to complete a level is why if you get hit and lose it, a new one will appear right back in the same place you got it from. That's because there's no way to proceed otherwise. There's also plenty of extras scattered throughout the missions, just so you don't have to backtrack too far to re-up. Even getting them for the first time is effortless. Look no further than this galaxy right here. You don't have to do anything to get the spring mushroom other than grab this coin. So the fact that the power-ups in Super Mario Galaxy are handed to the player with such frequency and ease means they shouldn't be pure upgrades in the way that they are in the 2D games. That's why the spring mushrooms should come with some disadvantages to counteract its advantages. The trade-offs make using it more interesting. If it just let us run normally and jump super high when we want to, it would be a straight upgrade in a manner similar to the power-ups in the 2D entries, which is completely antithetical to the design philosophy of the rest of the game. Let me remind you, the other original power-ups in Super Mario Galaxy have their drawbacks too. The Ghost Mushroom doesn't let us do much of anything, and the Bee Mushroom removes our ability to long jump and pick up shells. Sure, these disadvantages aren't as big as the one the Spring Mushroom brings, but the Spring Mushroom is introduced much further into the game than those two. At this point, players should expect and be able to handle more of a challenge. Maybe the term power-ups implies something that doesn't remain true for the items in Super Mario Galaxy. They're not intended to make Mario better. They're intended to give him a different set of abilities, some being better and some being worse. Grabbing an item like the Spring Mushroom is more of a lateral move than a vertical one. And once you look at it through that lens, I think the criticism of it's bad because it's hard to control doesn't carry much weight. Super Mario Galaxy is a game that thrives off of its variety, whether that's thanks to the level design, gameplay style, or aesthetics. So on this front, I consider the Spring Mushroom a major success. Using it completely transforms the way we play the game, and similar to the gravitational areas on the last planet, has us looking at the same level geometry in a new way. The emphasis on variety has remained a focus of the mainline Mario series since the first Galaxy, continuing into Galaxy 2, 3D World, Odyssey, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. And speaking of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, wouldn't it be cool to see how the Spring Mushroom would fit into a 2D game? Well, guess what? The Spring Mushroom is in Mario Wonder. Okay, maybe not the Spring Mushroom itself, but it does have something that's functionally identical. I'm talking about the Spring Feet badge, which is one of the expert badges that can be unlocked. It works in exactly the same way as the Spring Mushroom does, with Mario constantly jumping, but if you press jump at the right time, he'll leap much higher than normal. And because this is a badge and not a power-up, getting hit won't take the abilities away. This means the developers are able to design courses entirely around it, like they do in Super Mario Galaxy. There are only a couple of levels designed for it, but they do a great job in displaying the strengths of the badge in the same way that the Toy Time Galaxy does for the Spring Mushroom. mushroom. So now that we've discussed the philosophy of power-ups, let's get back to the level. Just like the best scene in Toy Story 2, this area is heavy on the conveyor belts. They're a good fit for the spring mushroom. Running on them doesn't work as well. We're better off jumping to gain more distance. So a power-up that jumps automatically is perfect here. Towards the south end of the screen, we can find a pipe, which will lead us to a secret area which will test our spring jumping skills. One other thing I want to point out is that from here, we can see the shell on the back of the eponymous heavy metal Mecha Bowser. I hope I said that right. Which is about the only thing that actually makes him look like Bowser. But I'll say more on this topic when we actually get over to him. This trash can looking enemy that shoots the laser at Mario is called a sentry beam. These guys are some of the only enemies in the game that are totally indestructible. You'd think that we might be able to defeat them with a ground pound, especially with the spring suit, but nope, totally indestructible. It's like Mr. Burns, indestructible.
So what you're saying is, I'm indestructible.
Oh, no. In fact, even a slight breeze could...
Indestructible.
This actually makes me consider them more like obstacles than real enemies. They're also stationary, so they're really just more part of the environment than their own beings. Like, I wouldn't consider the spiky plants in many other levels as enemies, just hazards. The only thing that actually makes the sentry beams distinct from any other environmental hazard is the fact that they have eyes. The next planet we land on doesn't so much look like a toy, but does still fit the theme of Mario being tiny in a giant world. This isn't something that's new to the Mario series, of course, but it's something that's consistently handled very well. Plus, aesthetically, there is still the train decal along the edge of the plate to connect back to everything else. Next, we land on the final planet of the mission, Mecha Bowser. Yes, he's called Mecha Bowser and the enemies from before were called Mecha Bowser, but I'm just going off what the Mario Wiki's telling me. Just about the only aspects of it that somewhat resemble Bowser are the shell and the bit of hair on top. Everything else just looks like a toy robot. It's definitely an odd decision, especially because in the previous game, Super Mario Sunshine, there was a Mecha Bowser that looked a ton like Bowser. I don't think this was intended to be a callback, because if it was, they probably would have made him look a lot like the Mecha Bowser from Sunshine. Thinking about this more deeply though, I did come up with a theory that I like. I think the idea behind this design is that it was just a giant toy robot, right up until Bowser decided to take over the universe. Bowser and his minions found the robot and decided to try to make it look more like him. They put the shell and hair on it, but as with most of Bowser's plans, it didn't end up quite right. I think the fact that there's a giant 8-bit Mario floating out nearby does give this theory some credence. I can easily picture Bowser coming across the giant Mario and thinking he needed something in his likeness to top it. In climbing up his body, we see a return to the gravitational surfaces from the beginning of the mission, and they're used to great effect here. The method by which we take them apart will also feel familiar, as we're screwing and unscrewing the same screws as back at the start. Once we get these first 4 flathead screws out, we know exactly how this is going to go down, and that we'll have a great time along the way. Next, it's up to his right arm, and seeing it fall away as we fly off feels fantastic. On this final section, we have to grab the spring mushroom again, and after avoiding some projectiles, it's time for a Death Starian attack on the critical weak point. I can't begin to think of any explanation for how Mario survives this explosion that he's right in the exact center of, but this is video games. Let's not question it. I guess the spring suit must keep Mario safe, because he's still wearing it after all this is said and done. The only part of Mecha Bowser that remains here are his wavy feet, which are now home to these disheveled Guillermos. Getting to see their dialogue while we have the spring mushroom here can be tricky, especially the last guy. I'll admit, I've accidentally jumped off of here while trying to see what he has to say, which frankly isn't worth it. But now it's time to grab the star, which will wrap up mission 1 of the Toy Time Galaxy. One moment I remember distinctly from playing this game as a kid for the first time on the original Wii was seeing the title of the next mission, Mario Meets Mario. I remember getting a giddy level of excitement that only an 11-year-old playing Super Mario Galaxy for the first time can get. Reading this title told me that this classic 8-bit Mario floating up there wasn't some lowly decoration, it was an environment I'd be able to get to. Could the fabric of the universe even sustain Mario meeting Mario in this way? Well, let's find out. We land on the same starting planet as before, but this time the 2 trains have combined to form one mega train. I heard about these in a John Oliver piece, so I wasn't too eager to jump on board, but what other choice did I have? The first planet we land on has a very unconventional shape, and looks like the head of Flood from Super Mario Sunshine. The objective here is to collect the 5 star chips, each of which are on a different surface of the planet, all with their own challenges. The first one is on the head of this sentry beam that again, frustratingly, we can't defeat. We'll find the next one on the head of this screw, which has a smaller screw on top of it. Once we twist the smaller one, the entire thing will spin and move down. This is great just thanks to how intuitive it feels, and how it operates in the exact way we'd expect. There's not too much excitement to the 3rd and 4th star chips, which we'll grab in this trampoline, and then break out of this crystal. But then the last one we'll find at the tip of this screw that we just screwed in, which wasn't possible to get before. This brings the whole thing full circle, and then it's time to take the launch star. Finally, this comes to what it's all been leading up to, Mario meeting Mario. What's really cool about this planet, aside from the obvious, is how the developers are able to use assets that already existed in the game to create something that's both a nostalgic piece of art, but also a proper challenge in and of itself. They took the old 8-bit Mario sprite with his original green, yellow, and red color scheme and applied the appropriate elements from the game to it, with the green becoming shrinking platforms, yellow becoming flip tiles, and red becoming lava. What's incredible is how they didn't have to change anything about the original sprite to make this work. If you didn't know anything about the original Super Mario Bros. Game, or didn't realize that what you were looking at was a 2D character, nothing about completing this area would feel out of place. The sections of the different tiles connect in a way that keeps the tension high and forces us to be constantly moving. The only downside is that we can screw ourselves over by not leaving enough shrinking platforms near the starting area, where the star will appear. But as soon as we make this mistake once, we'll be sure to not make it again. This planet is one of, if not the most, challenging individual planets of the game, thanks to how we can't stop for a second, and also how we can't go back over any tiles we've already activated. But what if I told you things could actually get even more difficult? Because this 8-bit Mario is hiding something on the other side. An 8-bit Luigi. We only visit this side during the purple coin mission, which is one of the prankster comet stars. I haven't been talking about these missions in this series, but I do want to call special attention to this one. First of all, you have to collect 100 of these coins, which is a tall order in an environment that's so unstable. There's 150 in total, so we are able to miss a good few, but getting 100 still isn't easy. Also, the lava that made up Mario's overalls has been swapped for this poison, which is an instant kill if we touch it, instead of letting us get away with a bounce or two. So getting the 5 silver stars on Mario's side might not be a breeze, but it is very doable. And even for a newer player of 3D platformers, they should be familiar enough with the controls at this point to get the job done. Plus, when we do it and then make our way successfully back to the launch star, we'll feel very, very accomplished. So now it's time for the final mission, bouncing down Cake Lane. In this adventure, we'll see the toy theme take a back seat towards an emphasis on a more culinary environment. This is also where the examples of great contextual level design are the most prominent. The first thing you'll notice about the starting planet is that the trains are going counterclockwise this time. I know, this is a lot to handle, but you have to keep it cool. Immediately as we leave the train planet, we're greeted with a full plate of the food theme. Before we even arrive at this next planet, we fly past spoons, orange slices, and then finally land on a cinnamon bun under 2 slices of cake. But this is just a taste of what's to come. Bouncing up between the 2 cake slices is basically automatic thanks to the spring mushroom, but it still looks cool and shows off another one of the power-up's advantages. The next step is a Willy Wonkian conveyor belt bringing along these giant chocolate bars. I think this section could have lasted longer, maybe with some chocolate bars that are taller than others or that have gaps in different areas, but it's still a sweet challenge. Once we clear this, we drop down to this plate with an absolutely delicious looking slice of cake on it and an even more appetizing 1-up. This 1-up right here is probably one of the hardest to grab in the entire game. Kind of. See, we arrive here with the spring mushroom, and if we fall while trying to get it once, we can easily run over as normal Mario afterwards to pick it up. However, that's not the real challenge the game designers have created for us. Getting the mushroom with the spring suit and returning safely is the only way to do it. Why else would the spring mushroom be positioned right along the path, if not to entice us into attempting one of the most grueling trials in the game? Getting the 1-up without the spring is like using the white Tanuki suit in Mario 3D World. Sure, it's technically within the rules of the game, but come on, we all know it's cheating. Using the spring is by no means easy or even ideal, but it's the only way. I can't get the 1-up without the spring mushroom, and I can't move forward with the level until I get the 1-up. I am, after all, a professional. To a viewer that might not be as familiar with the controls of the spring suit, this might look like I'm approaching this with the level of skill of someone who's never picked up a controller with an analog stick before. But I promise you, this is not as easy as it looks. If you decide to attempt this for yourself, which I insist you do, I'd recommend going into the mission with a healthy supply of extra lives, because you'll be seeing the number tick down again and again and again. Sometimes you'll grab the mushroom but fall off before you can reach the plate. In those cases, just be happy that you came out of it in the black. Completing this challenge requires a level of control over the left stick so delicate that by the end, your thumb will quadify as a Buddhist monk. This becomes increasingly difficult if your frustration rises with each failed attempt. The real challenge isn't in your thumb, it's in your brain. It took me 6 tries when capturing this footage, but with the amount of concentration I was putting into it, it felt like 600. If you have a copy of Super Mario Galaxy handy, I'd invite you to see if you can do better. Now that we've proven ourselves as an elite Mario Galaxy player, it's time to move up to the next area. After we've proven our mastery over the spring mushroom on that last part, every other section we use it will feel like a cakewalk. This moving section is trickier than it looks, but if we got the 1-up the right way, it'll be easier than taking a nap. In this next segment, things take a colder turn, which we can immediately feel with the shift in music. If the song playing here sounds familiar, that's because it's from the ice section of the Freeze Flame Galaxy. This music does have a rather chilly sound to it, and the reuse of another galaxy's theme here to convey the feeling of that galaxy is very smart. We land at the tip of a giant ice cream cone and then leap from it onto a series of popsicle sticks. Much like the giant Mario in the last mission, this is another example of objects we're familiar with being perfectly translated into level geometry. This continues on to the next planet, with the 4 lollipops creating a unique structure that would make sense for this section even if lollipops didn't exist in reality. This part with the many slabs of ice doesn't hit the highs of the last section, but it does offer a formidable challenge. If we go around to the back of the last planet, we can grab a life mushroom, and then it's on to the cake planet. Even though there's been a lot to this level already, this here is not the final planet. We still have a boss fight after this, but not saving the cake for the end feels strange. Cakes are celebratory in nature, especially this one with the candles we have to blow out. So I'm not sure why they didn't just send us here after the boss fight we're about to do, as a way of saying, good job, Mario. There's a secret pipe around the back, which will bring us to another sphere room with music notes. I really wish the songs that these played had a bigger variety. It seems like 90% of the time, it's either the underwater or underground theme from the original Super Mario Bros. Mario series has a rich history of great music, so to limit yourself to basically 2 songs is disappointing. Once we make our way to the top of the cake, our mission will be to blow the candles out on it by using Mario's spin. This little moment right here, using a move we always have to achieve a different action, is fantastic game design. I don't want to get too deep into a discussion on context sensitivity. I mean, I do, but not right now. So I'll just say that this is a great example of how lower context sensitivity creates a better player experience. Unfortunately, despite how genius the level design is throughout this entire galaxy, the final planet with the boss represents a big drop in quality. While everything leading up to this moment felt like great care had been taken to ensure that the elements of the levels made sense and fit the theme, this planet almost completely abandons that. This planet looks less like a cake than any other part of the mission. Sure, there's some decorations to give us that impression, but it's clearly not the same amount of effort as what's come before. I mean, really, who puts a jar of gumballs on top of a cake? The same mole from the Gold Leaf Galaxy is back, with a similar cannon, and he's defeated in much the same way. Get on top of him and give him a ground pound. This time though, we have to use the spring mushroom to get up to him, testing our ability to avoid hazards while using it, which is pretty cool. But as usual, 3 hits and the star is ours. And so even though it might not end off on the highest note, I'm going to miss talking about the Toy Time Galaxy after this. It really is one of the standout worlds of the game, and shows just how creative and clever the level designers could be if they really gave it their all. Everything that happens in the Toy Time Galaxy might not make sense in the grand scheme of things, but within the galaxy, everything works perfectly. It's a monument to great contextual level design, and proves that no matter how far out your game's concept might be, if you fit all the pieces together right, you'll create a world that feels as real as the one we're living in. But at this point, I think I've said about everything I can say about the Toy Time Galaxy. I think I've said everything anyone can say about the Toy Time Galaxy. So it's time to move on. Join me next time where we'll be living like giants, showing off new moves, and meeting old frenemies in the deep dark galaxy. I hope you'll join me there.